Hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining me for episode 3 of the Golden You series and for taking your time out to watch this video. I really appreciate you guys coming back, and I really pray that episode 1 and 2 have blessed you so far and that you're really connecting and engaging with this as we go along together. As always, I've got my gold scarf on. Can't leave that out. I've also painted my nails again, and this time I've got some gold earrings in, so I thought I'd mix it up a little bit. So yeah, let's get this rocking and rolling. I can't wait to share with you what this episode is all about, so let's go. Hello everybody, really grateful to you guys joining me again. So today's topic, I should imagine, is extremely relatable. It's one that happens to every single one of us. So today's topic is all about rejection and being in the waiting room. Like most of us out there, we all go through rejection at some point in our lives. We can't escape it. It's going to happen eventually, no matter how much cotton wool we wrap ourselves up in. It comes in all different shapes and sizes, whether it be from an unsuccessful job application, from an unrequited relationship, not being picked for the team, being excluded from a friend's event, being told you'll never measure up, or just simply nobody ever listening or getting back to you. These are all examples of how it makes us feel so unimportant sometimes that we may as well be invisible, right? Also, I believe the waiting room aspect of life and rejection both link in well together, as we tend to experience both at the same time, and this is usually before the breakthrough comes. Romans 8 verse 28 says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." All things. I believe this is true for all God's children, even if it means going through more rough patches than smoother ones to get you to where he needed you to be all along. So this episode is going to be mainly actually about part of my story that I'm going to be sharing today. And so I'd love to start us off by talking a little bit about my own experience in dealing with rejection and feeling stuck going from one waiting room to the next when I used to chase my previous full-time vocation as a designer. So I just graduated from my degree in my early 20s. I was a wide-eyed, fresh-eyed guppy to the rest of the world. As we were still in the recession/credit crunch era, I knew it was going to be tough getting a job, so I braced myself and prepared for it to be hard, but still thought positively at the hope a job would come along that would be a great step on the career ladder. However, little did I know, it was going to be worse than I'd ever anticipated. It seemed to happen for everyone else around me, even those who seemed to not have worked as hard. And annoyingly, it appeared to be all about who you knew and not what you knew. Yet, although the odd positive opportunity did come along that kept me going, and despite having a few more things in my portfolio to be grateful for, overall, they didn't lead anywhere, and I was just made to feel invisible and overlooked. I'd interned at countless fashion houses, hoping they'd keep me on or offer me a place on their graduate scheme, but they just turned out to be red herrings. I have so many other examples of my bumpy journey that one day I'd love to share in way more detail to help inspire others who are also struggling with the same thing. But I take it you've got the gist anyway and can probably tell by now. At this stage, I was so confused.com, wondering why and how on earth I couldn't catch a break. Like most of us when we're in that situation, when we don't know what's happening around us, or we're just facing one rejection after the next and one wall after the next. I just didn't understand it. And of course, despite the competition out there, as there is always going to be competition, on my CV, I guess you could say I was what you'd call the perfect candidate. Top marks with prizes and awards to offer. Yet, where was my job? Looking back now though, I realise none, absolutely none of that mattered at all, and it never ever will. I was so immersed with what I thought I needed to validate me being a designer and justify my degree that I was missing the point completely. Whilst all of this was going on, I was hopping in and out of different retail and cleaning jobs to support myself. Living a double life, I guess you could say. Actually, maybe a treble life, considering the whole time I'd secretly just wanted to do music, but just hadn't had the guts to admit it to myself yet. So cut to about 4 years later of trying to strive for a security in a career role that just wasn't appearing. This also included having relocated already for 2 actual design jobs where I was either laid off or the company went bust. So by then I'd had just about enough. So the waiting room was slowly becoming a permanent place. Meanwhile, as well, whilst all this had been happening, at the same time I'd been interviewing for design roles left, right and centre and spending hundreds of pounds on train tickets into London and getting continual rejection after rejection. I just didn't know where to go from there, really. I had given my best, I had my best work, there was nothing else I could do other than just keep going, right? I'm sure we've all experienced that. This is why I'm sharing this aspect of it. What really hit me actually was I realised at the time what I'd always really wanted and dreamt of deep down, even when I was a student, was to work for myself and start my own business doing something creative. My theory was, if no one else was going to hire me, well, I'm going to hire myself. So, after a year or so of starting up my own label and making a go of it, I sadly never really had the finances to take it any further. So, as well as already feeling a bit down about everything, it got to the stage I'd pretty much decided that I'd nearly given up working in design. I mean, I had the odd freelance job going, which was great, but it wasn't financially viable. Even they were hard to come by, and a lot of them I just felt a bit messed around with. So I threw caution to the wind and eventually went down to the local temp agency, handed my CV in, and literally got a job working in an office the next week. So after about 6 months, they actually offered me a permanent position, which I ended up taking, only to retract it a week later and resign. It was because knowing deep in my heart, it wasn't right for me. And I knew that there was a part of me that should give this design career one last shot. So, as you do, without a job to go to, I was literally trusting God that I'd land on my feet. I'd only saved enough money for a month, so I came to the conclusion that something had to give. Amazingly, within 2 weeks, I'd applied for a role at a well-known fashion house, and I'd gotten the job. I genuinely just could not believe it. I was so grateful. And by the end of that month, I'd started working there. At this moment, I was so happy, I was rejoicing, I was really glad, and I believe this was a move of God in my life. But sometimes God allows us to go through things for a reason though, and I'll get to that part in a moment. But as well as it being a blessing, had I known what I was going to go through there, I honestly, hand on heart, can say I would never have ever taken the job. So after enduring nearly 2 full years at this company, all the time it had taken to get to that stage in my life where I was finally working hard at the role I'd always hoped for and prayed for, feeling like I was moving up and growing in the world, and heck, even relocating again. This time, like, fully everything though, like I moved my whole life. And the ironic thing is, like I've mentioned before, this was in fact the job that ended up firing me. It's so ironic, isn't it? As I said before, I'm going to save the details for another time because I've got so much to say on this particular section of my whole life. As a result of that happening, I knew it was an attack of the enemy on my life that had caused me to lose my job. It was also completely unjust how it all unraveled as well. Yet God knew exactly what he was doing, and he'd allowed it to happen to me for a reason. Even though it was really painful, God had a plan in the midst of the pain. At the time, I didn't understand. I was so upset and in shock at how I'd been treated, especially after the whole journey I'd been on, as I've just described, leading up to this moment. And yet, here I was again, one big giant no, we don't want you, all over again, history repeating itself again. So yeah, how on earth do you bounce back from that kind of rejection? Who do you turn to? And why have I shared all of this? I know it's really personal, but I've peeled back some of the layers of my past especially to try and help others relate. I'm being really vulnerable today, as I know there are many out there who have gone through the same as me, and I know for a fact 100% even way worse than me. Please comment if you've been through something like that. I'm sharing this because I know that it's important to share what it's like to be rejected. The truth is, I know one thing for certain is that I could never have gotten through any of it without my faith in God. Not for 1 second. I knew I had to trust God, even when I couldn't see how or why this was even happening. Proverbs 3 verse 5 to 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths." And I'm so glad I did that. And it's amazing, the results, if you just trust God, because it's incredible to see how God literally turns ashes back into diamonds again. In conclusion, by losing my job, it actually did me a massive favour. I was able to move even closer to Danny, who at the time was my boyfriend, now husband, and it made it easier for us to get engaged literally months later. I'd also propelled myself into a new office role that I got weeks after actually getting fired. Sure, it wasn't my cup of tea, and to be completely honest, I knew I wasn't in the right state emotionally or mentally to work at all, really. But I had no choice at the time, so I took it for financial purposes. I'm so glad I did it though, as it led me to so many other like-minded people who seemed to be in exactly the same situation as me. I'd never experienced that in a role before. The sheer warmth and acceptance from so many different people from different walks of life that just took me for me, cared for me, and treated me really well as a colleague, but also as if we were friends as well. God knew that's exactly what I needed. At first, I had a protective barrier up and I didn't want to let anyone in for weeks. But over the whole year I spent there, I'd fully let my guard down by the end of it and had the best time. I learned for the first time in my life how to have fun at work. And I also learned that I can have friends at work and that I don't have to be the reject, I don't have to be the odd one out, I don't have to be the person being left out or being overlooked anymore. That's exactly what I'd gone through with this whole design fashion thing. I suppose you could say, even though I was back in the waiting room all over again, it felt so great. It actually felt really liberating and so great to not have to worry about what I wanted to do with my life for that period of time. It was a breath of fresh air, not caring or striving anymore for a career. What God knew I needed was that I needed to heal and just let things be for a couple of years. But also, God's timing is perfect because it coincided beautifully with me and Danny getting married and settling into married life. Ultimately, when I look back, God had used this whole process of rejection from A to Z, ending up back to literally square one and doing jobs that didn't fulfill me, to actually significantly give me the zeal and zero tolerance against my own fears that I needed, which ultimately led me to finally pursuing my dream for being a musician and following my heart call from the Lord for worship and music ministry and being a musical artist. Sure, I know I've opened myself up to even more rejection by now entering this particular industry, but I believe that God has toughened me up for such a time as this. And I already have experienced rejection within the industry already. And I thank God for giving me a heart that can now handle that. I've had to become quite hard, like a tortoise shell almost, to help me prepare myself for this stage of my life. So whatever happens now is totally okay. I don't need to be accepted by anyone else, as I know God accepts me. As long as I know I'm following His path for me now, that's all that matters. What it comes down to is, it doesn't really matter what happens going forward, because once you've experienced rejection on a certain hemisphere, you tend to not let it affect or hurt you as much ever again. It just has no place in your life anymore. It really doesn't. And rejection has no hold over you. It doesn't define you as a person. I believe as Christians, we go through the most rejection. Jesus was the ultimate reject. I thank God when I get rejected. I'm like, Lord, yeah, thank you. That means I'm on the right track, right? We're in the best company possible when we get rejected. This leads me now really well into this very famous verse in the Bible, James 1 verse 2-4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. As we've all heard it said before, rejection is redirection. This saying has been with me for a while, but every time this has happened in my life, God has always had the bigger picture. I have reason to celebrate when I get rejected. Yeah, just like James says, when I go for a trial or I'm stuck in the waiting room, I can rejoice. I can still worship God in the valley and in the desert place. You were made for so much more than this. So whatever you're going through right now, just remember to say that to yourself. I'd like to ask you now as we come to a close, and please let me know, what have you recently been rejected from that has ultimately proved that God had you on a different and better path the whole time. As for the waiting room aspect, I've learned that God makes us wait longer than most if you're doing the right thing in the right way with the right heart. So if you're waiting, I want to encourage you and say, consider it pure joy, whatever you're going through, that God is working it all out for your good and in His perfect plan and timings. One of my favourite Bible verses, Romans 15 verse 13 says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope." And whenever you're having a down day, remember to say this to yourself, good things are coming. Remember, when you get rejected, that means good things are coming. I know it's a total opposite theory and you probably think I'm crazy saying that, but God doesn't rush His artworks. We are all artworks. Like any artist, we don't rush our work. And same with God. God is the ultimate artist. And it takes time and precision to create something beautiful and good quality. Just like us, diamonds in the rough. He has never once rushed a single detail in our lives. And don't forget, diamonds are created because of the severe pressure that they're put under. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11 says as well, He has made everything beautiful in its time. So I'm just going to finish now. And I really pray that this has really spoken to you. And if you don't take anything away from this, I pray that these words stick with you. If you feel things in your life have taken forever to get moving or completed, don't be discouraged, don't be disheartened, and don't be disappointed. Rejoice. It's only because the Lord is busy making you a masterpiece. You are worth your weight in gold. God sees the gold in you. Even when the world rejects the gold living inside of you, even when they repeatedly throw away your value, God never throws away what He has predestined and pre-planted in us to use. You have no reason to quit or apologize or think for 1 second that just because the world around you hasn't validated the gold living inside of you in the physical, doesn't mean the gold that God has placed within you is not validated in the spiritual by Jesus. God is all the validation for the gold living within us that we need. So remember who you are in Christ. And I just pray that for anyone who is going through rejection, please reach out to me. I'd love to just sit and pray with you and talk with you and just to spend some time helping you. And I just pray that this video, from me sharing some of my story and opening up a bit more, I really appreciate you spending your time listening and understanding as well. And if you have any questions, please ask me some questions. I look forward to sharing episode 4 with you. I'll share the next subject again very soon. But thank you so much again for sharing your time watching this with me. And I'm very grateful for you. God loves you so much. And don't forget that gold living inside of you. Let it rise up and let it shine. Lots of love to you. And I'll see you on the next episode. God bless. Bye-bye.